Unexpected Request Novel Audiobook. Chapter 1 to Chapter 5. In the middle of the night, a black Lincoln SUV was driving into a luxurious mansion located in the most prestigious neighborhood of a city. Zhu and Cheng's eyes were covered with a piece of silk cloth inside a villa. The man didn't want her to know who he was. Don't be afraid. Take a deep breath. Zhu and Cheng, you can do it. Nothing is more important than keeping Dad alive after he has a liver transplant. It is nothing to sacrifice for Dad. The sound of a car driving into the villa was clearly heard. As things turned out this way, the only thing she could do was to keep comforting herself in her heart. When Chenjue walked in, he immediately saw Zhu and Cheng standing in his bedroom. The 18-year-old girl was in bloom, looking all grown up and beautiful. Hello. She stammered and greeted stiffly as she felt the man approaching and took a step back unconsciously. She thought that after a few days of mental preparation, she would not be afraid. But at this moment she felt scared, and even wanted to run away. Chenjue didn't know whether his action tonight was brutal. All he knew was that he needed a child of his own before his next birthday in order to complete the task given by old Master Mu. At that moment, Chenjue condescendingly sized the petite girl. Why are you so scared? The man's voice was calm and attractive. Zhu and Cheng was a little shocked. He actually sounds very nice and young. Why would an old man who is past 50 have such a perfect voice? I am not an HIV carrier. And I also have no perverted and special hobbies in bed, the man said with a deep and mellow voice, seemingly trying to appease her. He was sure that she was not shy. Instead, she was afraid of him. Before she could even react, she heard the man say again, if you are afraid of pain, I will try to make you happy during the process. Let's start. The man announced coldly, as if he was announcing the beginning of a meeting. He was so serious that she was dumbfounded. In an instant, she was being carried in his arms. This was the first time Zhu and Cheng had ever been lifted up by a man like this. So she felt her heart beating rapidly. I don't know if you are fully grown. If it hurts, let me know and I will stop. Chenjue was mindful of her feelings as he reminded her. However, it only made Zhu and Cheng even more afraid. Taking in a deep breath, she bit her lips and closed her eyes tightly. With her thick eyelashes fluttering, the man suddenly felt a tingling sensation throughout his body. She was born fair, like a delicate flower bud that had yet to bloom under the morning sun. At this moment, her skin was glowing with a faint hue of pink due to embarrassment. He reached out to undress her, and she flinched. Don't step back, the man said bobbed fiercely. He suddenly grabbed her thin and fair wrist, pulled her into his arms, and whispered in her ear, don't you dare take a step back if you don't want me to force myself onto you. Zhu and Cheng didn't dare to take another step back, while her cheeks quickly turned red because of his words. Her body was now pressed against the stranger's. As they faced each other, she could even feel that his body was strong and sturdy. However, if he is a young man, who is rich and handsome, why does he have to pay the price to get an ordinary girl like her to bear his child? Perhaps he is extremely ugly. So ugly that no woman wants to bear his children in real life even if he has a lot of money. I have a question. Just ask. The man's voice was already filled with displeasure, while his warm hands removed her clothes in a rather hasty manner. Initially, we agreed on having an IVF. Why did it turn into natural conception? This was a question that had been stuck in her mind. The man's warm breath touched her forehead. Ah, it hurts. She cried out in pain as she felt a sudden grasp on her body after she finished asking the question. Her cry caused Chenjue's voice to fluctuate instantly, as he said, I don't want to lose any of the chromosomes in my body. I can only be assured by omitting the procedure in between and putting it in you directly. Is this reason good enough? Then, she was pinched again in her hands. It hurts. A thin layer of sweat formed on her forehead. as her mind went blank for a while. She tried to struggle but to no avail. Her frail body was easily restrained by him after he domineeringly pressed her under his own. This was a delicate flower bud. Chenjue knew that in order to have a child, he must penetrate her. He believed that the most humane way to do it was to treat her as gently as possible. At the moment they became one, he frowned slightly as his breathing became heavier, fearing that he would not be able to control the instincts of his body. This delicate and fragile flower bud might be in danger of being crushed by him. That night, Cheng experienced countless feelings between the sheets: pain, helplessness, and lethargy. Cheng didn't know when the man left. When she woke up and checked the time, it was 3 a.m. The housekeeper, Dang Fong, hadn't slept yet, so she walked over and spoke to her politely. "Miss Juan, I will take you to clean your body." "Thank you, but I can do it myself." Cheng was in a daze. She could feel her dried tears tightening on her skin. She couldn't lay bare before the housekeeper even though the housekeeper was a woman. Right then, Dang Fong left the room. With a swift movement, she got up and headed to the bathroom in a daze. When she returned from cleaning herself, the bed sheets and quilts in the bedroom had been changed. Soon after, she fell asleep in that night. She had a dream. She dreamed of the year when she was in junior high school in her grandfather's hometown. It was spring and it was raining a lot. She was secretly watching the basketball game on the field in the neighboring high school. The popular guy in that high school who looked extremely attractive while playing basketball was a senior with the surname Mu who had just transferred from another school. After waking up the next day, she felt abnormally tired and sore all over her body. Standing in front of the vanity while holding a toothbrush, she got distracted in front of the mirror for a long time, as she thought of last night's dream in a daze. Mu was an unattainable dream for all the girls in the school. Whereas she, the humble and insignificant girl who was frequently bullied in school, had always fantasized about having a brother to protect herself at an age when she didn't understand romance. When she came to learn of romance, the first boy that came up in her mind was Mu. Unfortunately, he had left school abruptly after only 1 year of high school. She was brought back to reality when she realized the wash basin had been overflowed. She gasped and shook her head to dismiss the thought. Cheng, you don't deserve a man like him." Then, she locked herself in the room, as she felt like she had been invaded. In the evening, Cheng learned about the news. That man was here again. Dang Fong was surprised. Young master had just come yesterday. Why is he here again tonight? Everyone in the mansion got busy at once as they had to prepare everything quickly. Cheng felt that her body wouldn't be able to take it anymore. But it was awkward for her to highlight the discomfort she was feeling. Dressed in a pair of elegant black trousers and a white shirt, Chenjue went into Cheng's room directly after entering the villa. Her breaths were light and shallow as she dared not utter a single word. It was pin-drop silence in the room. With the suit in one hand, Chenjue stretched out the other, and stared at her, whose eyes were covered with a piece of thick cloth. Then, he wrapped them on the back of her neck and gently pulled her in. Cheng staggered as she held her breath, not daring to move. Chenjue looked down at the little girl who was about to be embraced into his arms, and his Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. He pursed his lips tightly, while his gaze fell on her fair and clean palm-sized face. His gaze grew heated and intense, as he slowly moved his gaze down until it finally fell on her pink lips. It was clearly stated in the contract, no kissing. Damn, I actually regret the term I said at this moment. Get to the bed, and let's begin, the man said in a croaky voice. Throwing away his coat, he turned off the light while carrying her. Laying under the man in the dark, she knitted her brows, and bit the pillow, not daring to make the shameful sound. She silently endured the man's repeated assaults and raids. When they were done, the man left without leaving a single word. Cheng was so tired that she was on the verge of fainting. But she remained curled up on the bed for a very long time. The doctor said doing so would make it easier for her to conceive. Chenjue came to the villa for a few consecutive nights. Even when he was so busy with work that it was already very late at the time, he would still come. His driver, Feng Chong, and Deng Feng were a couple in their 50s. Based on their past experience, they wanted to advise their young master that he had to take it slowly as it was bad for his health if he indulged in it too much. However, this proud and aloof young master was also known as the cold-faced and cold-blooded boss, who was difficult to talk to. The couple could only keep their mouths shut. They could only watch on helplessly as the girl, in order to cooperate with the energetic young master, was being ravaged every day until she was listless and weak. This was supposed to be the last night of the month. Cheng couldn't figure out the man's behavior at all, as he was sometimes gentle, but sometimes forceful, as if he deliberately made her feel pain. He behaved like that over and over again, causing her to have an involuntary feeling in her body. It was so overwhelming that she was almost drowned in that feeling. After the man was fully dressed, he put on a luxury watch and said coldly to her, who was curled up under the blanket, "I wish you good luck in conceiving." Then, he left. The bedroom went silent once more. For Cheng, this unknown man whose face she had never seen was terrifying. It was as if there was a monster or a wild beast inside his body that had just been released. She was afraid that she might not be able to endure it any longer. That night, he left the villa rather late. Based on the sound, she could make out that he was standing outside the villa right after he got out of the room. And finally there was the sound of a lighter opening with a click which was audible in the empty villa. She only needed to get up, sit up and look out the window to see what he looked like. But she was afraid that it would be a nightmare. 1 month later, the pregnancy test kit in Cheng's hand finally showed a double strip. During this month, she had been anxiously waiting for the results of her pregnancy. Other than Deng Feng, she had not seen anyone else, including that man. If she didn't conceive this month, she would need to repeat the process all over again. But now that the test had shown that she was pregnant, she was elated. All she wanted was to successfully deliver the baby inside her, complete her mission, and spend the rest of her life to slowly forget about this unbearable part of her life from her memory. Everything will eventually become a thing of the past, right? After learning that she had successfully become pregnant, the other party immediately arranged for a meticulous checkup for her. When Deng Feng came to negotiate, Cheng only made 2 requests. The first was she would continue her studies until her baby bump became visible. Then, she would take a break from school and wait for delivery. The second request was that she wanted to stay at a rented unit, which would give her relatively more freedom since she wasn't used to the emptiness of the villa. "I have to get the consent of the boss first for your requests. After all, you are carrying his baby." Deng Feng immediately turned around and made the phone call. Standing by the windows on the highest floor of the hospital, she told the boss the 2 requests raised by Cheng over the phone. 1 minute later, Deng Feng hung up the phone. "My boss has agreed to your requests." Nodding her head, Cheng said her thanks wistfully. After returning to the rental house in the afternoon, she called the hospital. "Hello. Are you Dr. Zhao? May I ask how my dad's current condition is?" "Don't worry," the doctor told her over the phone. "The funds are in place. And the liver donor also will be in place soon. The operation is being arranged and will be performed soon." "Thank you." Cheng didn't know what else to say. Money and liver were all exchanged with my body. Is it something that I should be happy for? Or is it pathetic? No, it's neither of them. After hanging up the phone, she rested her head on the desk in a daze. After a long time, her eyelashes were wet with tears. But she wiped away her tears with her palm and forced herself to laugh. "My dad will be fine. which is definitely something to be happy about. 5 months later. By this time, her bump was already showing. Dangfang was tasked to handle the formalities of her suspension from school. When Dangfang came out of the school, the principal personally saw her off respectfully and shook hands with her to say goodbye. Cheng waited in the distance, slightly surprised at the sight that even the principal would treat Dangfang respectfully. It was conceivable that the boss behind Dangfang, who was the father of her child, must be a distinguished person. However, she didn't want to think about it. Dangfang came over and said to her, who was standing by the car, "Don't worry, I took your leave on the grounds that you are in poor health. No one will know about your pregnancy. We will keep it a secret." Cheng heaved a sigh of relief. That afternoon, she went to visit her dad at the hospital. At the age of 18, getting pregnant and giving birth to a child for an unknown man was absolutely unacceptable by her dad, Juan Li Kong. Fortunately, it was autumn, so she could wear more clothes to cover her belly. She wore a thin sweater, but her bump was visible, so she put on a loose cloak to cover it. Inside the finest private hospital in a city, Cheng came to the floor where her dad was hospitalized. Being very familiar with the place, she found the ward. But before she went in, she heard the voice of her stepmother, Li Huijin, coming from the ward. "Li Kong, I've been thinking. We only have 2 daughters. Although Yue is not your real daughter, she has always called you dad since she was a child." Before Li Huijin finished speaking, Juan Li Kong, who had been recuperating on the hospital bed for many months, interrupted. "Just get straight to the point. I am your husband who loves you the most. I always know you love me." And Yue. Li Huijin grabbed Juan Li Kong's skinny hand and said softly, "Didn't you say that you will send Cheng to study abroad when she graduates from high school? Yue is only 2 years older than Cheng is. But she keeps hanging out at the bar all day long and doesn't go to school. I'm really worried about her, as she's my only daughter. Li Kong, I hope Yue can study abroad together with Cheng." With a slight frown on Cheng's face, she stood outside the door of the ward and heard every single word. Yue was 20 years old this year, and she somehow started playing truant during grade 2 of junior school. Smoking, drinking, and staying out at night were part of Yue's daily routine. Hence, Cheng didn't have a good impression on this stepsister of hers. Their father, Juan Li Kong, was not a rich man with a meager life savings of 600,000 only for the family from his second marriage. He worked hard every day until he fell ill and had liver problems. Even when the doctor announced that he was dying, he was refused to use his savings for treatment. 2 months ago, Juan Li Kong made it clear that he had given up treatment. When the patient wanted death, no one could do anything, including the doctor and his biological daughter. With tears streaming down his cheeks, Juan Li Kong enunciated his last wishes. "Cheng, I only managed to save up 600,000 for you. Don't be sad after I passed away. After you are done with my funeral, you can take the money to study abroad. All the best in your future undertakings. Don't be greedy like your mother. And don't be so incompetent like me. If you can listen to me, I'll be able to rest in peace if I die now." Thinking of this now, Cheng became teary-eyed. Knowing that her father insisted on keeping the 600,000 he saved for her studies, she had to secretly sell her body in exchange for a sum of money and a matching liver transplant for her father. Standing outside the ward and seeing the affectionate look on her father and stepmother, she wasn't happy, and was more upset than ever instead. In the end, she didn't go in but went downstairs. Right at that moment, Cheng happened to run into Yue. "Is this our good girl, Cheng?" Yue pushed Cheng lightly with her hand, which was also holding a cigarette, then blew smoke at Cheng. After sizing up Cheng, she clicked her tongue Quite well developed for an 18-year-old. Your dad is almost dying and has no money for treatment. Would you like to consider selling yourself to extend your dad's life? Cheng looked at her disgusting sister without any expression on her face. As if she was forced to the point where she would be suffocated if she didn't vent her anger. She retorted sarcastically. Wow. Do you speak from your butt? Because you talk like you fart. Yue widened her eyes and was instantly angered by Cheng's attitude. You damn brat. How dare you talk back? But Cheng just ignored her and walked away gloomily. How dare she walk away from me? Yue was so angry that her hands were shaking. She turned around and cursed. Stop pretending to be innocent. I can't wait to see when you show your true colors. Your dad said that your mother is a whore. So, I suggest that you go to a reliable hospital for an examination. I am really worried that you are a little B*TCH crossbred from 100 men's genes. When Cheng was 7 months pregnant, she clearly felt that the life inside her had become alive. As it would kick her. It was a joyous feeling that only a mother would understand. Later, she would imagine what the baby would look like after birth. Is it a boy or a girl? Is my big belly due to overnutrition? Since the last time she went to the hospital and heard that her father agreed to let Yue study abroad as well, Cheng seldom went to the hospital again. It was that she didn't love her dad anymore. But it was because her bump grew bigger. She was afraid that her dad would notice if she visited him too often despite having the loose down jacket covering it. Moreover, Li Huijin stayed by the hospital bed all the time. She wondered if she was really watching over her husband or she was watching over the savings for Yue. Cheng hoped that it was the former. After some time, Cheng learned that her father had started to get busy with work, as he kept working overtime and traveling on business trips. That made Cheng angry and helpless. She communicated with her father on the phone again and again, but to no avail. After Chinese New Year, it was her due date. In the premium delivery room of a private hospital, several female doctors looked after and examined her all day long, and they dared not make the slightest negligence. Cheng never cared about the identity of the child's father, but these people would occasionally talk about him in front of her. Although they did not say his name, Cheng could be sure that the identity of the baby's father was probably no ordinary businessman. However, Cheng didn't know her own physical condition at all. She heard the results of the doctor's discussion that she would have a cesarean section. Then, she was pushed into the operating room. No pain was felt during the process. But then again, she thought she would feel the pain after the anesthetic had worn off. The baby was in her body for almost 9 months and was now suddenly being delivered. She would soon be separated from her baby. The thought of being separated from her own child was very painful. In fact, it was an excruciating pain. Unknowingly, tears flowed down the bridge of the nose and onto the cheeks. Isn't all this just a fair deal to begin with? But why does my heart still hurt so much? Dang Feng paid attention to Cheng's emotions throughout the whole process as she watched her cry in helplessness. Finally, when Cheng was pushed out, Dang Feng followed the order and said to her, "You are only 19 years old. After all, this matter can only be an unspeakable secret in your heart. Girl, I hope you can get over it as soon as possible. I wish you happiness for the rest of your life." These were words of comfort, but they were cruel. "Can you tell me, is it a boy or a girl?" Cheng asked weakly. "It's a very healthy baby girl." Dang Feng followed the instructions of old Master Mu. In order to avoid trouble in the future, she could only lie to Cheng. In fact, she gave birth to twins. They were a healthy baby boy and a healthy baby girl. Closing her eyes, Cheng was tired and sleepy, while her face was pale. "I have a daughter. A new life is born into this world. And it is my daughter." Cheng only stayed in the hospital for 10 days. She couldn't stand the idle life in the hospital, and couldn't stand the pain of her mind, focusing only on the issue of her daughter. What a pathetic deal. After being discharged from the hospital, Cheng returned to the rented house. The first thing she did was to call her dad. Li Kong's phone was picked up by Li Huijin. Cheng, your dad is busy. Do you have something to say to him? Cheng was stunned. Why is it so difficult to talk to my dad nowadays? When will my dad be done with his work? She asked. I'm not sure. Your dad is working hard to get you to go abroad. I will ask him to call you back when he is done. Okay. Li Huijin said. I'll wait for my dad's call. Cheng lowered her head and hung up the call. In fact, she knew that Li Huijin would not tell her dad that she called. She could count her relatives on her fingers of one hand. Her dad went to another city to work hard for his family. The newborn baby daughter might be in this city or in another. Since birth, this baby belonged only to the man behind the deal. As for her mom, she seemed to have never existed since the beginning. Cheng didn't know what that woman looked like, where she was, how she was doing, nor had she ever missed her. Shaking her head, Cheng forced herself not to think about her unknown mother whose name and appearance she didn't even know. After a while, her phone rang. It was Cheng's best friend, Li Xiao. She picked up the phone and answered it. Hi, it's been a long time since I video called you. Why are you hiding from me? Li Xiao complained, and then propped her face on her hand in frustration. Cheng, do you really want to go to the UK? What if someone bullies you there? I can't protect you. Also, I heard that foreign boys are precocious. And many of the schools have mixed gender dormitories. You must pay attention to that thing when you go. Hey, do you know what I am talking about? Forget it. Let me tell you frankly. If you really can't control yourself in front of a handsome foreign guy, remember to make him wear a condom. On the screen of the phone, Li Xiao was sitting in a small restaurant, seemingly waiting for her food after placing her order. Behind Li Xiao was the restaurant wall, on which a large TV was hung. There was a piece of entertainment news playing on the TV, with very clear subtitles. It was said that a 56-year-old rich businessman recently had a daughter. The identity of the daughter's mother was a mystery. Cheng, do you hear me? Li Xiao saw that Cheng was motionless on the screen, and something was clearly off about her. So she shook her phone. Cheng, can you hear me? What's wrong with you? You are scaring me. Cheng was feeling emotional now. When she was discharged from the hospital, she vowed that she would never think about the baby she had carried in her belly again. But in reality, she couldn't do it. The baby had half of her blood flowing in her body. She was going crazy. What is the use of dwelling on it? I must stop thinking about her. After hanging up on the video call, Cheng went to wash her face with cold water. But she still couldn't calm down. Probably because she was abandoned by her mother since she was a child. So she projected her childhood experience onto her baby. Cheng couldn't forget her childhood that was void of affection. Without her mother, there was only her grandpa and dad. Her dad made money in another city, while her grandpa gradually grew old. Neighbors kept talking about her parents. So bad voices filled her entire childhood. She grew up feeling inferior and was often bullied. And she didn't know why having no mother would be a reason for being bullied by her classmates, who constantly hurled insults at her. At times, she hated her mother. She closed her eyes, while her mind was now full of the entertainment news from the TV about the rich businessman past his 50s who recently got a daughter whose mother remained a mystery. Now, she had become the kind of woman she hated most. That was a mother who was not responsible for her child after giving birth. Getting back to her bedroom miserably, she picked up her phone again and searched for the news about the wealthy businessman and his child. The data showed that the wealthy businessman was 56 years old and had sparse hair. but he maintained a good figure and was not short in height. Cheng couldn't determine whether this old man was her baby's father. Oh, his voice. Cheng began to search for related videos of the wealthy businessman, trying to identify whether the voice of the old man was the same as the voice she heard on those nights. Unfortunately, after searching for a long time until her phone died eventually, she couldn't find any video that had audio. Hence, Cheng became desperate. Dongcheng district of a city. The wealthy and powerful Mu family. It was time for dinner, and the dining table was filled with various delicacies. Almost everyone in the family was present. Two nannies pushed the crib over to the side of old Master Mu. Sitting in a wheelchair, old Master Mu looked at his beautiful great-grandson in the crib. This kid looks like Chenjue. When he grows up, he must be an impressive figure. Old Master Mu was delighted. The Mu family members present around the long table all smiled faintly. Even if they felt angry, they dared not show it. Old Master Mu played with his great-grandson for a long time before he raised his head and said affirmatively to the whole family, "If it weren't for Chenjue and his hard work over the past 2 years, I am afraid that the Mu family would have collapsed long ago. Any of you have objections to this fact?" No one had objections, but no one voiced their agreement as well. Even though old Master Mu was old, he still had sharp eyes. He looked around and saw the expressions of everyone in the Mu family. "I am old. It is time for me to pass down everything of the Mu family to these young people." After saying this, old Master Mu looked at Mu Cheng. Cheng, follow Chenjue and learn more from him from now on. Mu Cheng uttered a nonchalant "okay" and said nothing. "Dad, what do you mean?" Chai Shufan stood up directly with a bitter expression on her face. "Mu Chenjue is indeed your grandson. But Cheng is also your grandson. Isn't he? What you just said has really upset me. How can my son, Cheng, be worse than Chenjue?" Chai Shufan dared to say this only because Mu Chenjue was not present today. Old Master Mu had only one son, and his son had 2 sons, which were Mu Chenjue and Mu Cheng. The former was mature, serious-minded, ruthless, and decisive in business. The latter was known as a playboy, with many tricks up his sleeve, but they were all used to pick up girls. As for ambitiousness at work, no one else knew whether he had it, besides Mu Cheng himself. Old Master Mu ignored Chai Shufan's protest, as handing over power was an important matter. If he allowed emotion to sway his judgment and made any mistake, the entire Mu family's legacy would be ruined. "Make the video call. I have something to discuss with Chenjue," Old Master Mu ordered the servant on the side. Someone immediately connected the video call and placed it in front of Old Master Mu. "Grandpa, what's the matter?" Mu Chenjue, who was on a business trip in another country, asked while sitting in a solemn office. "It's time to give my great-grandson, this little guy, a name. I have one name in mind. Mu Ancher. What do you think? Anche. I hope that this little guy will grow up to be worldly yet pure," Old Master Mu said. Being ignored, Chai Shufan sat down with anger, feeling angry but not daring to speak again. In the video, Mu Chenjue didn't give his answer to Old Master Mu immediately, but frowned. After a while, he said firmly, "Grandpa, keep the an, and replace che with cheng. Both words have the same literal meaning." "Mu Ancheng. Sounds good." Old Master Mu immediately looked at the adorable face of his great-grandson in the stroller and said, "You have a name now, boy." Old Master Mu didn't intervene in naming his little great-granddaughter, because the baby's father believed that his daughter should be spoilt like a little princess. The official name would be chosen by herself after she grew mature. In a blink of an eye, the day came for when Cheng was set to go abroad. Cheng did not go with Yue because Li Huizhen arranged for Yue to go to the UK 1 month in advance to adapt to the life there. When you get there, I will have to trouble you to take care of Cheng and Yue. Juan Likong solemnly reminded Li Yi at the airport. Standing at 180 centimeters tall, Li Yi was a handsome guy, who was Li Xiao's elder brother. He planned to study abroad, but he couldn't decide which country to go to. After hearing from Li Xiao that Juan Cheng was going to England, he immediately decided to go to England together with her. Every man had a first love who was unforgettable, and Juan Cheng was the girl in Li Yi's heart. Take care of Cheng. Li Xiao gave Li Yi a hug, and whispered in his ears again. You don't need to take care of Juan Yue, lest you bring trouble to yourself. Li Yi was speechless. When the two lined up at the security checkpoint, Juan Cheng frequently looked back with tears in her eyes, and waved to her aging father. When Juan Cheng was once again back in the prosperous city, it was already 5 years later. She had been away for nearly 2,000 days, which wasn't a very short duration, nor was it long either. She used to be ruthlessly destroyed by fate and had no power to fight back. Now, she only wanted to be the master of her future through her own efforts. Early in the morning, Cheng, over here. Li Xiao wound down the car window on the side of the road and waved to Juan Cheng, who was walking out of the neighborhood. Time flew. 5 years later, both of them were no longer teenage girls. Juan Cheng and Li Yi returned to China together yesterday, and Li Xiao drove to pick them up. Last night, Li Yi took Juan Cheng back to the Li family's house for dinner. His parents were extremely satisfied with Juan Cheng, their future daughter-in-law. This morning, Li Yi originally planned to attend an interview in a company with Juan Cheng, but he was caught up in something and could not go together. Juan Cheng got into the passenger seat of Li Xiao's car, and fastened her seat belt. Do you know what my mom said to me after you and my brother left last night? Li Xiao asked. What did she say? Juan Cheng was worried that Li Yi's parents were not satisfied with her. My mom said, look at Cheng, who has fair skin, is elegant and gentle. Why don't you look at yourself in the mirror to see why there is such a big gap? You are just an introvert who only knows to scratch your feet and swear all day, Li Xiao said, while she reached out to touch Juan Cheng's tender face inside. The air in the foreign country is so nurturing. That's not true. You don't know the hardships of being away from home. Juan Cheng slapped her hand that was touching her. Focus on driving. The both of them chatted all the way. When they arrived at T Corporation, it was already 8:45. Li Yi would better not be late. The boss is a tyrant who doesn't know what sympathy is, Li Xiao muttered, while bowing her head to send a WeChat message to Li Yi. A tyrant who doesn't know what sympathy is. Juan Cheng grew nervous. Using the internet on her phone, Juan Cheng searched the details of the boss of T Corporation again, hoping that she might be able to find something helpful for the interview. Most of the search results she got were the usual gossips about the rich and powerful. The Chinese name of the president of Mu Group and T Corporation was Mu Chenjue, who was 29 years old this year. It was unknown whether he was single or not, as no media had dug up details about his personal life. In fact, the surname Mu was quite special for Juan Cheng. But it was just some innocent and naive things that belonged only to her teen years, which had now been buried in the deepest part of her memories. There was major news about the power struggle between two sons in Mu Group 5 years ago. The prince, Mu Zhuicheng, who was unanimously recognized by the outside world, was overthrown in a night. Mu Chenjue, a descendant of the Mu family of unknown origin, was suddenly recognized by Old Master Mu, who later succeeded in taking the position, and eventually inherited the Mu Group. A descendant of the Mu family of unknown origin. What the author of this news insinuated was that Mu Chenjue was the illegitimate son of the wealthy family, who had returned home. Juan Cheng looked at her phone, deeply absorbed in thought. The towering height of the T Corporation's building made people feel scared the moment they stepped into it. Li Yi hurried over. and was worried when he saw such a large-scale company, coupled with his previous knowledge of the company's history. He didn't want to lose face in front of Cheng. I must succeed in this interview. In a studio of the building, there were 5 leaders who participated in the screening. One of them was the man in power of T Corporation, the boss, Chenjue. After another graduate of a prestigious school had finished the interview, one of the interviewers looked at Chenjue, trying to judge the boss' decision from his face. But when he looked over, he found that the boss' attention had somehow been directed to the CCTV screen, looking at something. Next, one of the interviewers said, the CCTV was placed outside, and it was watching the unemployed people of all kinds who came for the interview. Through their behavior outside, the interviewers could accurately judge how these people behaved in private. Chenjue was looking at one of the girls with a darkened and complicated look on his face. She wasn't a girl, but a woman. At 23 years old, Cheng had lost the immaturity from her early youth, and was well developed now. She exuded some kind of unique femininity in her air and expressions. Chenjue was suddenly brought back to 5 years ago, when this woman was moaning and satisfying him under his body every night. Li Yi will come soon. Outside the corridor, Li Xiao poked Cheng. Cheng regained her senses and put away the phone she had been looking at for a long time. Somehow, Cheng found that the boss, Chenjue, looked somewhat familiar through the picture on her phone. He looked really similar to who played basketball in high school. Moreover, they had the same surname. Li Yi ran upstairs at this time, walked to Cheng, and caressed her hair fondly. Sorry for being late. It's okay. It's not our turn yet, Cheng said to Li Yi understandingly. Li Xiao pouted at the side. This is too much. Can you temporarily put away your public display of affection? I'm afraid you'll have to tolerate this every day after I marry Cheng then. Oh, hurry and marry her. Li Xiao's eyes were beaming with excitement, as she looked at Li Yi and said, Dad and Mom were very satisfied with Cheng yesterday. After the two of you have a stable job, you should hold your wedding ceremony. Nodding his head, Li Yi couldn't help looking at Cheng. Cheng was a little embarrassed. She was very satisfied with her current life, as she had gotten over her past, thanks to Li Yi's meticulous care and enlightenment over the past 5 years. Before Li Yi confessed to her, she could feel Li Yi's feelings about her. She felt inferior because of her previous experience, so she began to alienate Li Yi at that time, and even alienated any men who were approaching her. During the countless days that were extremely bleak for her, Li Yi did not stop pursuing and caring for her until he found out about her unbearable past. To Cheng's surprise, Li Yi didn't detest her, and didn't think it was her fault that she was forced to bear a child for a stranger. Cheng felt very lucky. Next, Li Yi. I'm going in. Li Yi squeezed Cheng's hand. Go ahead. Cheng nodded. When Li Yi pushed the door in, he immediately felt a fierce gaze directed at him. Looking at the source of the feeling, he saw the legendary young boss of T Corporation. Chenjue had observed everything Li Yi did to Cheng outside. The interview process was formal, serious, and professional. Li Yi had a very good background, so his calm attitude was a plus point when he answered the interviewer's questions one by one methodically. Chenjue turned his gaze to the CCTV screen again. On the screen, Cheng was staring at the door intently, biting her lips slightly, and clasping her fingers, as if she was nervous about the result of the interview of the person inside. Thanks for listening to the Bravonovel audiobook. Welcome to download the Bravonovel app. Read the novel Unexpected Request online and get the latest updates.